Okay, so this morning we're going to have a go at doing different kinds of printing, and nothing too technical or difficult. We will be doing some leaf cutouts and printing later. These are just little messy examples of what I was doing on the Monday Zoom session, and as you can see, I've cut out some leaf shapes, and I made the watercolour paper earlier on in the session like that. So what we shall do to start with is just make some hand painted, hand coloured watercolour paper, which we can use for our collage later. Okay, I'll get it focused. So with watercolour, it's often best if you wet the paper first. I'm just using normal white paper. It's not watercolour paper, because it's just going to be used for collage. We're just going to be cutting out little bits and sticking it down. It doesn't matter if it buckles a bit, so you don't want to use anything too nice. No posh watercolour paper or anything like that. So I'm just wetting the paper first, and then just going to add some paint to it. Now, you're going to want lots of different kinds of colours and textures, so don't worry about being too careful about it. Use an orange and blend some of the colours together. Just means overlapping them a little bit. Into some yellow. That. And then you can sort of get, use the idea of sort of patterns for different textures. Like that. You can sprinkle water back over it to get just different blurring. You can speckle it and just putting the paint on my paintbrush and then tapping the paintbrush. I'm just sort of thinking of autumnal and leafy colours. That's what I'm going for. And drop some water on it. So it's just messing around with the paint, really. Nothing particularly technical. And just cover a sheet of A4 in lots of different sort of colours and textures. Okay. This is quite an old brush, so it's not going to do any harm just tapping it away like that. You just want a variety of different colours and textures, sort of patterns, so that when you cut them out, you get just interesting marks. It's just a bit of mark making, really. If you have, you know, you could use a sponge as well. You can see on this one, which I've done before and already cut shapes out of. Just lots of random marks, really. That's what we're going for. Splash away and have a bit of fun. glue. My paint palette is getting a little bit mucky because I'm not being particularly careful. Remember, you can, if your paint palette does get messy, you just wipe it clean with a bit of tissue. Can put water on and let it run. That keeps the colours quite nice and bright actually. See this bit here? Just put the paint down and splattered some water over the top. And it's quite wet. And then let it all run. Okay, so that will be ready for the second part of the session. So I'm just going to put that to one side to dry off a bit. Put that out of the way. Whilst that's drying, we're going to do a little bit of monoprinting. So traditionally, monoprint means obviously one print, and you would have a plastic or a metal plate, square bit of plastic or metal. You would roller ink over the top, sort of the ink that you would use for lino printing, which is a specialist ink. It's quite tacky. It's not like drawing or writing ink. And you would roller that out very, very thinly. You would place a piece of paper on top, and you could either just draw straight onto it, or you might use a picture which you would then trace over. And when you peel it off, you would have an image, and a single image, a single print. It's different from a direct drawing because graphite from the pencil is very different to the ink, and also you just don't know quite what you're going to get because you are to a point you're drawing blind because you can't really see what the finished piece is going to be like. With traditional monoprinting, because you've layered the ink on by hand, some parts of it might be darker, some parts of it will be lighter. There might be little blobs of ink which become more noticeable during the print. So obviously we haven't got the tools to do that. So we're going to be using our carbon paper. Because the ink gives a different effect from normal pencil drawings. I'm just going to get a clean bit of paper. This one's covered in paint. So, but you're still, to a point, you are still drawing blind. You don't quite know what you're going to come out with until the end. If you're using a small image, something say like this, or a bird, then and it's not going to take you too long, you do have the option of putting the carbon paper down, putting the picture down, and rather than taping it down into place so it doesn't move, you're just holding it firmly in place, and then every now and again you can flip it up and see how it's going. But of course you do have to be really careful with this if you're going to do that, because it only has to move a tiny fraction and it can put the whole drawing out. Or you could tape down maybe half and leave half of it free so that you can just keep an eye on what's going on if you want to. Now I'm going to put a little bit of a background down first for my picture. Particularly with this carbon paper, which isn't as strong as traditional ink, if you're going to use newspaper, it's fine to use the print, just where there's writing, but don't use the coloured photographs because the ink, it repels the ink slightly. It's hard to get a really dark drawing on it. Here's an example of two monoprints done on background. So you can see this bird has been done on lots of different print backgrounds, and it's a lovely image. And that they haven't really used pictures. It is mainly type. It's probably done in the traditional ink as well, which means it's slightly denser. But yeah, be cautious about what kind of paper you put down as a background. It's very effective, but try and avoid things that have got a lot of colour to them, because that's usually got a kind of sheen to it, which repels the ink somewhat. So I'm going to put down just a little background of some music notations. I'm just going to stick this down. So this has just been printed on normal printer paper, so I know that it will be fine. You can use some sugar paper. It will work perfectly okay on the back of sort of sugar paper, if you wanted to sort of mix up the background a bit. I'm just doing it a little bit randomly and quite quickly. Obviously you can be a little bit more careful in how you decide to do it. But or as with this one, it was literally just a page from a book that I did it on top of. It gives quite a nice background effect. So I'm just going to stick these bits down. Maybe one more, a little bit over this side. Just like that. So you can trace any kind of picture you want. Trace a black and white one. A line drawing is a good way to start if you're not quite so confident at drawing. This is a picture of a little bird, and it was actually, I think it's actually an etching. Etching is where people draw into plastic or metal plates using a very sharp point. Then you rub the ink into the picture, rub excess ink off, and when you print it, you get these very nice, quite sharp lines. So if you're looking for pictures to work from for Monoprint, it's a good idea to look for, say if you wanted to go onto Google and just find some images, work from either drawings or etchings. Etchings are very good too for drawing. So I'm just going to put my little bird on here. I'm going to sort of tally up the wood that it's standing on approximately over the bit of brown paper, and then I'm going to pop the carbon paper underneath. Like that. Now you can either use a pencil or a biro pen. This is because I'm sort of tracing an image that's an etching. I'm going to use a biro pen because it's very linear. I'll do one more little etching in a minute where I'll use a pencil, just to show you the slight difference that sometimes comes about. So it is just a case of tracing over the top. But previously, when we've used the carbon paper for tracing, we've just concentrated on doing a simple outline. This time, you're actually, you're really working into it. And carbon paper works the same, as in if you put a lot of pressure on, it will be darker. If you put less, it will be lighter. So, remember that. You are drawing in the normal way. I'm doing almost like a cross-hatching style of drawing because I'm not really using much shading. I'm just going for a linear drawing for this little bird. Obviously I'm doing it a little bit quicker. You can obviously take the time to get a better drawing. Sorry if you can hear my very annoying dog barking in the background, two rooms away, but oh, it's so annoying. There's probably a cat in the garden or something. So I'm remembering not to fill the whole space. Obviously the picture looks very dark, but I'm not just randomly going over it completely black and breaking the image up. But you can shade as you would normally shade a drawing with the carbon paper, and that does work as well, which I'll show you in the next little one. You will use up the carbon paper slightly more quickly with this style of drawing than if you are just using it for tracing out a basic outline, because you're actually pushing a lot more ink down onto the page, whereas with just a linear outline you're actually using it quite minimally. If you run out of carbon paper but like using it, find it useful, particularly for this kind of monoprinting, then you can buy it off eBay quite easily. So I tend to buy mine. Packs of all different sizes. So I'll just hold it quite as carefully as I can, just lift up so you can get an idea of what it's looking like. There we go, my little bird. I won't do the whole thing because I think you can see what I'm doing. Now, what I might do with the log is I'm putting down quite a lot of pressure with my biro pen so that you get the strong lines of the wood. What I'm then going to do is get my pencil and I'm shading over the top. Now, using a pencil means that I'm putting a slightly different kind of pressure on, and hopefully we'll have a look, see if it works. It's probably not quite so easy to see on the visualizer, but actually you've got some dark lines and you've also got much paler where it's just shading. Right, because he's got dark little claws and feet, I'm putting them in, but I'm making sure that I'm leaving, there's a little white line to distinguish the feet from the dark wood. And I'm just copying the drawing as accurately as I can. It's a good way of getting, if you're not big at drawing, would like to practice more, it's a good way of practicing when you practice on top of an existing drawing to see how the artist has done it. You're effectively doing it yourself then, and can get a good idea of where to put those marks to create an effective drawing. It's often easier than working from a photograph when you're just sort of starting out, when you're a beginner. Okay, there's I'll leave it at that for a moment. You can see what I was up to. What you can also do is, because it's the ink is waterproof, if you want to add a little wash of colour, you can do. So I know this is that his I don't know my birds very well. There's a little wren or sparrow, but I'm just going to briefly make him into a robin. By just putting in a little bit of red for his little red breast. There we go. So you can touch it up. The ink won't run, but of course the paint over the top can make it paler. So try not to do a full big wash. Just touch up the little white areas. A little bit brown. Just so you get the idea that you can play around with it as well. Okay, so that's one. I'll just show you doing a picture. I'm just using a bit of sugar paper. It's a sort of browny colour because portraits look particularly nice on coloured backgrounds, really. So let's do the little girl with the pearl earring again. So popping that down on there, and this time I'm going to use my pencil, and I'm going to do a little bit more shading. So I'm doing a background, putting some shading behind her to bring her face forward a little bit. So I'm going around the outside of her face rather than actually drawing a line of her face. I'm just shading behind it. I'm busy drawing here. I really should put my I wear glasses for fine work. Just popping my glasses on quickly. That's a bit better. So her eye, just going to draw a little line, and now I'm just using a little bit of shading, and I'm not putting too much pressure on her eye. It will be a bit of trial and error, particularly when you start, to see how much pressure you need for something to come through. Different makes of carbon paper all are slightly different as well. So I'm holding this carefully. Let's have a look. Yeah, so you can see that I'm not putting much pressure on here, but I could probably do put in a little bit more. And then a little bit of shading over her lips. So I'm literally just copying copying the tonal drawing. Well, it's a painting, but it's effectively become a tonal drawing by printing it out black and white. I had a young girl at a print workshop that I did, and she had a picture of, I think it was Harry Potter, someone like that, and she really worked into it and was putting a lot of shading in. I was thinking, oh, is it just going to be one big black mess at the end of it? But it was incredibly effective. She was really, really pleased with it at the end. Look. I can definitely go darker with that. Because I'm using carbon paper, it's easier to flip it up and have a look. If you're doing it the traditional way with the ink, there's no way you can do that because the paper sticks to the ink quite a bit, and so it is completely blind what you're up to. Which can be nice, and you get a surprise at the end. But sometimes you could have spent an hour doing a very careful monoprint and then discovered that it hasn't really come out how you wanted it at all. So this less messy way is a nice way of doing it. Okay, I'm going to darken up her eye a little bit. You can be quite, quite fine and precise with this style, just as you would a normal drawing. You'll also find that the different paper that you do it on will make a difference. Because I'm working on sugar paper, you're going to get a slightly paler print than if you're working on white card or white cartridge paper. And doing something like this is a good way of training you to really look at the picture that you're drawing over the top of, and really sort of working out where those shades, the mid-tones and the highlights are.
Kirsty, when you were doing the little bird,
yes,
had you already stuck down the pieces of paper underneath?
Yes, I just glued them down.
Okay.
Yeah, just a sort of a sort of random background to it. You can obviously be, more precise. So that's one that I sort of completed a little bit more of on Monday. So you can see you can see the sort of difference between using a pencil and just doing a bit of careful shading, and this one was done with a biro pen. So you can see it's definitely darker, a different style, but they both work. Okay, so next we're sort of going back to play school, really, to school. We're going to do some basic printing, and these are just little examples of the sort of messing around things you can do. And my paper that I did earlier is almost dry. There's still bits here and there that are wet. You could just blast it with a hairdryer if you wanted to get it done more quickly. But I've got other bits here from when I was working on Monday. Now I'm just going to use a white background, but you can obviously do this on top of coloured paper and coloured card. It doesn't matter. Relatively smooth. Don't use the sugar paper, because sugar paper is not good for watercolour. It's too absorbent. So these just the different things that you can do. So I'm going to actually use real leaves. If it has a good vein to it, that's what you really want. And what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to use it as a mask. So you could use a old sponge to sponge your paint on. I'm just going to use a paintbrush, and I think I'll use sort of autumnal brown colours. Now I don't want the paint too wet for this, because I don't want it running underneath the leaf. So I'm really put the water on, and I'm just giving it a really good rub with my paintbrush so that it becomes quite sticky. Well, it's not actually sticky, but it looks more viscous rather than watery. And then I'm just dabbing the paint around the edges. I'm just using it in a quite a just using the flat of the brush. Adding in slightly different colours as we go. I'll put in some yellow now. If you happen to have acrylic paint is actually better for printing, because it's much thicker and less watery, and printing works better with thicker paint. Okay, I'll get quite yellowy towards the bottom. A little bit watery, not too bad. And into some green, I think. If you were using acrylic paint, use the paint without adding water to it. Nice vibrant colours. So then you're left with the outline of a leaf. A little bit. Touch up a little bit of it to sort of make it a little bit sharper. A bit of dabbing. You find that this one here was done by using a sponge. That gives quite a nice sharp outline if you use a sponge. It's less likely to run. And then you can do what you like with this. What I'm going to do is then take my leaf and I'm going to, where's my big paintbrush gone? I'll put it down, there it is. And I'm going to add some paint. Actually, what should I do? I think I might do a slightly different. I'm going to do the leaf itself is going to be sort of green and blue. So I'm going to put the paint onto the leaf. Again, plenty of pigment on it. And I'm using the side of the leaf where the leaves are more sticky up, more prominent. So I put a sort of green on. I'm just going to go back over it and add some blue. Can't really see, because of the colour of the leaf, it's hard to see exactly what's happening, but I'm sort of putting some blobs of blue around the edge, like that. And then it's just a case of putting it back on. Now I don't want it to fit exactly, I want it to be slightly off. Getting a piece of card, put that over the top, it makes it easier to push it down. Smooth it down, put as much pressure on as you can. If you've got a roller or something, you could use that. Let's have a look. Yeah, I think that's relatively successful. It's quite pretty. And yeah, don't worry about trying to put it in exact. You kind of want that slightly off image, because it's not a precise drawing, so you don't want it to be too precise. So that's, you know, that's quite pretty. Another thing you could do would be, I'll just show you an example on this one. So here I did the outline of the leaf exactly in the same way. See if I can find the leaf that I used. Okay, used that leaf. Put the paint around the edge, and then rather than actually do some printing, I just cut out some shapes of leaf shapes, not even particularly accurately the shape of the original leaf, and just pop that over the top. So again, that's that's another thing that you can do. So that's using the paint, the painted background that you've already done. Again, I quite like this texture on this one, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to draw around my leaf. Like that. And then just realised that I've put my scissors have disappeared. I have a strong feeling they're upstairs where all my Christmas wrapping paper is. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my knife instead. I'm just cutting out the paper, but I'm inside of the leaf so that the actual leaf will be smaller than the cutout will be smaller than the actual leaf. So I'll take my leaf. This time I'll use, now I'm going to use my sponge. I did one leaf as an example. You could place several leaves down at a time so that you get a sort of an overlapping image. This is just as I'm just doing a kind of example. I'm not doing a finished artwork. You might want to think about putting several leaves down and creating a design. There we go. So this is a much drier way of doing it. You're just using the sponge, almost no water on it, just a tiny bit of water on it, and then you get a very dry and quite sharp background, which is quite nice. You can also use the background that you've painted, and there's my leaf, and I could stick that down over the top. That's quite effective. I'll just slap a little bit of glue down on it. I could break it up. I could have cut it up into a few individual leaves. And again, I want that offset sense. They're quite pretty. Another one that I did was say with this one, where I actually, I actually painted kind of like the shape of a leaf around the leaf, and then let's do one more over here. Again, I'm just going to use this. Now, I've got several different colours on here. I haven't been particularly careful with what I've put on there, but I've got some blue and I've got some yellow and green. Yeah. And I'm going to use a smaller paintbrush. And I'm going to actually just paint a leaf in it. I'm going to go the opposite of realistic. So bit wet. Put a bit too much water on there. I'm just going to dab a little bit off with some tissue. So then just do a little bit of painting on there. So it is completely, it's just a load of mixed media, just playing around with it. Like that. And you've got that kind of option as well. You can do, but because there's a real, here's a good art word for you, a bit of a juxtaposition there between, you've got the sponge painting, which is very highly textured. You've got the sharp white outline of the mask, and then you've got a very loose little sort of watercolour drawing in there as well. So it's that mixture of different tones and textures and styles, which are quite effective when you're playing around with something like this. It's quite nice. There is, of course, also the traditional rubbing side of things that you can do. The thinner the paper, the better. This is quite good paper. It's quite thick. Actually, with a traditional rubbing, it's often best to have quite thin paper, and then you could always just cut it out. I'm just going to have a quick go with this paper. So I'm just using an oil pastel to rub over the top. Again, very important to have one with good veins for this one. It is coming through a little bit, but the paper is a bit too thick. You can see the veins beginning to appear here. I'm going to try it on the back. This is much thinner paper. It's got a picture printed on the back, so please ignore that. There you go. There you go. That's much more effective. You can still mix your colours up a little bit. I'm doing this quite lightly. My oil pastels, it's just I've just got a box of old mixed ones, and they're not all water soluble, but the oil pastels you have should be water soluble, so you could actually then add water to them as well and play around with that. You can use the oil pastels in the same way that you did the paint to leave a mask. And if you have water soluble ones, then you could add water to it afterwards and see how the blending works. It's just mixing all these different things that you can do up together. They make very nice cards. if you had chalk pastels, not oil pastels, but the traditional chalk pastels, they would also work for this kind of thing. Sort of going through a whole rainbow of colours here, I thought, in the end. Into orange. My hand is getting quite tired holding it down in place, I must say. And finally a bit of red. Where's my red gone? Okay. There we go. Little rainbow leaf there. You will find even oil paint on. I was looking for a dry brush. You will find that oil pastels are actually muckier than you would expect. You can see like that. So you're going to you'll need to do something more with it. Now I could have extended, obviously, or I could have put several leaves down and then extended that kind of rainbow background against a lot of things. You could either, you know, do a rubbing and place that in it, or paint something in there, or do another leaf print in there, whatever you fancy. And you'll just find that just go without planning things too much, because you're never quite sure how things are going to turn out. And other people, or particularly on the Monday group who did this, they found out that some of the pieces of paper which they hadn't planned to use, but were off-cuts almost, were so pretty they ended up using those. So go with the flow and just have a bit of fun. It is, you know, like being back at school again, really. I think what they've been doing was that they've been, when they put their leaf down and been splotching the paint on it, the piece of paper underneath that had got covered with extra bits of paint, they really liked and ended up using those bits. So yeah, it's a form of collage and mixed media. I'm sort of doing a little bit of a rainbow on my leaf. See how that turns out. Green and down to blue. Stick that down there. Grab a piece of paper. If you don't want to use real leaves at all, you don't have to, you can just cut out your own stencil. If you want something that's maybe less realistic, just more controlled, more stylized, and you can just use your own little cutouts. Just use a little bit of card rather than just plain paper. It doesn't have to be really thick card either, just enough that it won't buckle instantly under the watercolour. But I'm using this very dry. Particularly if you're using a sponge, the water, you only need a little bit of water on it, and it will retain that water enough to get the paint down without it being wet. Okay, lovely sharp image there with a cutout stencil, sharper than you would with a normal leaf, because obviously it's harder to keep those edges flat. So, you know, again, you can have a go with that. Also, the bit of leaf that I used as a stencil happened to be red card, but the little bit of the paint has come on it, and actually that's rather lovely. And then you could use that as well as part of your pattern. Think of patterns, think of it more as patterns. So, you know, I have this negative space, but I'm not going to fill it exactly. What I'll do, I'm going to offset that you've got the same shape. I'm going to offset it up here. You do things like that. It's playing around with it. Who knows what we'll come out with. Go back into it, add a bit more colour to it if you want. Okay, that's what I quite like. I didn't want it flat green. I had a bit of Okay, so just a few things before we finish. I'd like to recommend, if you quite like creating your own watercolour paper, which can be used for any kind of collage, but I would recommend Brusho. I shall write that down, Brusho, which it's not cheap, but it's like ink crystals, powdered ink, and they come in little tubs. And you spritz some water onto a piece of paper, you sprinkle the ink crystals powder onto it, and then it becomes a beautiful vibrant background. And you can also just sprinkle some on and then spritz it. I'm saying spritz, you get those little as if you were spraying perfume or something like that. There's little bottles, you can use those, or you know, a hair product that comes in a little pump spray. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that because it is a really good product if you like to make your own coloured backgrounds. One of the Zoom participants who've been taking part this morning said that rather than putting watercolour onto her leaf, she actually put the oil pastels directly onto the leaf, and then, because hers are water soluble, added a little bit of water, just a little bit of water to them, so that they became damp enough that they could blend a little bit and then print quite nicely. And so she enjoyed doing that. And one thing that I forgot to mention when we were doing monoprinting is you can use the white carbon paper. I'll get that so you can see that. It's not. There we go. It's just a case of using the white carbon paper exactly the same way. Very good for doing nighttime scenes and wintry scenes, and do it on black or blue card or paper. I just used a picture of a wintry scene. It was my little winter etching scene, and it was just a case of remembering that actually I was colouring in, shading in the white, not the black, which actually got quite difficult because then I flipped it and forgot that and started shading in the black, because it's counterintuitive to colour in the white when you're doing this shading. But yeah, have a go with the white as well. Very effective, particularly for Christmas cards this time of year. That's it. So this is the last session for this current run of Zoom art classes, which these are recordings made for. There will be another series in January, and the new series of workshops and classes online will be exactly the same, apart from they won't be doing clay. So there will be one new recording that will be added to this series. There will also be a watercolour recording, which my husband Jamie will be making at some point in the near future. So keep an eye on the links on the Creative Health at Home website for more links to different kinds of recorded tutorials. I hope you've enjoyed them, and thank you for joining me.